owners are always an X factor. It's like this crazy, it's something that I love about vacation rentals and the industry, but it's weird. There aren't a lot of industries or verticals where like you have this weird X factor. Like you always have like your business, your organization, and the customer. Sometimes there might be a middleman or someone in between there, but you don't usually have this other stakeholder that like owns the inventory that you're trying to sell. And it's always a topic that comes up. And specifically lately, there's this new breed almost of owners. And maybe some of you are seeing this where maybe they bought during COVID and real
Yeah.
estate was crazy.
Yeah.
And it still is in some ways has leveled out, but they got into this vacation rental and at top dollar. And so now, guess where their focus is on production and on you as their property manager. Are you generating revenue for that? So there's always been that dynamic, but now it's amped up almost because of the real estate prices and where people got into these properties and what their monthly mortgage is and what they have to cover. And
Interest rates.
interest rates now crazy too. And so it really, there's an opportunity, and we've always, some of the best managers in the industry really understand this and they build great relationships with their owners and engage regularly with them. But a lot of times they try to ignore them a little bit and they're like, tell them as little as you can, tell the
Yeah.
owner as little as you can, and that'll be better. But that's never better. And that's certainly from my background in customer success, like ignoring this really important business partner can
Yeah.
hurt you in a big way. And that's really how I encourage our customers to look at that relationship.
You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. And I'm excited to bring on Brise Carpenter, who is the VP of Customer Success at Hostfully. Bryce, after our interaction together the first time, getting introduced via David Jacoby, my main man, if he's listening or watching, love you. But I just wanted to say it was a great conversation. And so I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Well, yeah, thanks. I'm thrilled to be here and excited to see you here face to face. I'm surprised we haven't bumped into each
I
other at
know.
conferences and stuff just over the years.
I know. And I was like, when David was telling me about how you joined the team and what you're doing with the company, I was surprised too, because then realizing the connection between your wife, who I've known through, I don't think we've ever met in person, but just going through social media, she's a legend. So I was like, okay, how did I not draw the two and two together? But super cool just to like get to meet you. And then of course, now we're going to be able to hang out in person at VRMA. So it's always
Yeah.
exciting for new connections, new friendships to blossom. But to set a little bit of a tone for this episode and for everyone listening and watching is that, I've been really, really curious and kind of just watching. I love the media space and the podcast medium because you get to have a lot of conversations. You get to hear a lot of conversations too. And I've been hearing a lot of focus and conversation, turning points, I guess, within the industry. And when I reached out to David to potentially have him on the show, he was like, no, you need to have Bryce because Bryce is talking to our customers on a day in, day out basis. And you're hearing a lot from property managers of every size that, whether they're one property and just getting started, if they're, pros and have a very solid portfolio. So I really want to set that tone because we're going to dive into a lot of stuff that may or may not be talking points currently, but are shifting the conversation towards more sustainability, profitability, operations, you name it. So, Bryce, before we get into those topics, I would love for you to kind of introduce yourself, give us some backstory of your career and your overall journey in this industry, and then how you ended up where you are today with Hostfully.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, happy to do that, Will. So it's been 13 years almost now in hospitality tech specifically. And so I started way back in like 2010, 2011 with Navis, a company that, some of your listeners are probably familiar with, had been,
I use Navis as a hotel manager, so I remember the
yeah,
product very well.
yeah, yeah, and some of our property manager customers. So one of our first products was like a long distance product that basically, when a guest made long distance calls in a home, we would grab the credit card so that the homeowner wouldn't end up getting charged with long distance calls. Like who even has landlines now, right? But
Yeah, seriously.
so that's kind of setting the stage for how far back we go here. But I came in at Navis, and at Navis, as you're aware, Will, like a very robust CRM platform, like
Mhm.
a lot to learn to use. A very, we called it disruptional technology. Really kind of disrupted how you did business, and in a good way. And there's a lot of opportunity to drive more revenue and conversion and production within your reservations and marketing teams. But it was disruptive, and so early on, kind of in the journey there, the team at Navis, even before I joined, realized that, if customers were going to be successful and stay as customers, they needed to use as much of the technology as possible. And the more that they used, the longer they stayed as customers. And so, really, back when customer success was just kind of a very new topic. I mean, Salesforce is considered one of the pioneers of customer success. And this was back in those early years. We were starting down that path at Navis of customer success. And really, how do you help customers learn to use the software, adopt it, and have success doing so? And so I spent about 11 years at Navis helping to build the customer success team. And
Mhm.
that was everything from onboarding and implementation, helping customers learn to use it. The education team was part of my team, technical support, and the client advocates who were customer success managers. We called them client advocates back in the day, who really, they were a business coach. They came alongside you, learned about your company, your needs, and tried to help you use the software to the best of your ability. And so that's really kind of where my foundation was set, in the early years, and throughout, a big chunk of my career here in hospitality and in tech.
Well, it's funny because anyone listening right now is probably like, "Yeah, the amount of times I've signed up for a software or a product and I just get nothing afterwards. No onboarding, no training, no help, no walking through. Outside of my demo, if I was lucky enough to get a demo, that's it. Like you're left to the wolves, and that's kind of a pattern in hospitality, right? Like I started as front desk agent. I had 2 days of real training, and then the rest of the time I was like, all right, figure it out. Ask questions if you need help. It's like, okay, never worked in a hotel in my life, but here we go.
Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty active thing. So hearing that you guys at Navis were really focusing on, hey, how do we get our customers to stay longer? And it's actually teaching them and training them to use the product to its full capability.
Yeah.
Um, Really smart play. Underestimated play, I think, by a lot of companies that could probably adopt something like that and do a lot better. But what when did that pivot change for you to from Navis to Hostfully? I know this was probably more recent than anything, but what was that, that shifting point for you?
Yeah, so it was actually just about 6 months ago. So this month in October is my 6-month anniversary at Hostfully,
Yeah.
and, yeah, it's been an awesome fit, and honestly, I could tell you, I don't know that I ever would have pictured myself working, with a property management platform, property management system. But
Mhm.
what really won me over with Hostfully was, one, the focus that David and Margot and Steph have on helping their customers succeed. There's just such a heart of service at the
Yeah.
company, and that has to start with the founders. That has to start with the initial team that built the company, and so that's huge.
Yeah.
And then, really, we're taking a very different approach at we call ourselves a property management platform instead of a
Yeah.
property management system. We want to be that core. We want to be that platform that enables connections to best in breed, best in class. And that doesn't mean every single thing we're going to build. Some of the, best in class we're going to integrate to. And there are a lot
Yeah.
of great software companies out there that serve a very specific need and do a great job with that. So we've really looked to empower that and also look to empower kind of the local expertise of the property manager. And that's something I'm super passionate about. Like, how do you really build an experience, for those guests? And so Hostfully, both through our platform and our guidebooks and the integrations we allow, really super focused on that. And so that's what excited me about coming over to Hostfully, a very different approach than just a property management system, but a platform. And so here we are.
Yeah. Well, ever since I started working with Hostfully, I've noticed that you get the Facebook community. David, again, another shout out, my man. But David is so active in that group. Like I always see him like not just like little short responses, like oh we'll send this through our team and figure out how we can help. He types out some pretty extensive responses to helping people with questions and maybe some bugs or issues that they are seeing with their property or their listing or whatever. And it's very customer focused. I've noticed it. I've seen it as a customer myself, but then also within the community, Facebook group. So it's super cool to see that is a core value within the company already without having to have brought you in. But now that you're in the company, congratulations on your 6 months.
Thank you.
Um, what is your big mission and role with this new direction of just really focusing on this customer success with every Hostfully user out there?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to helping our customers win, using our platform, and that looks a little bit different for each customer. And so there isn't like one formula. And so that's why I think customer success is really important, because each property manager is a little bit different. Their business is different. They're in a different region. They're dealing with different regulations, a different tech stack. And so that takes, kind of the same approach that we had at Navis back in the day, a business coach, a consultant, someone that's going to come alongside you and help you build that right tech stack and that right software relationship for your business. And so we really are digging in. And as you'd mentioned, like I'm typically on 20 to 25 customer calls a week, a lot of times just back to back, and really just digging in, doing business reviews, looking at how customers are using the software, hearing about their goals and their objectives, and then trying to help them be better and use the platform better and build and connect the right integrations for their business. And so we're really building out that customer success arm. We've always had a great support team and a great onboarding team, and those are important components as well. Customer success is different in that it's proactive. It's proactive
Yeah.
adoption. How do you help that customer learn to use the tool, and when doing that?
Well, it feels like it's more full circle, right? Like you have the onboarding, which is the start. You have the support team that is like if things come up. But outside of that, you're missing that in between part, which is awesome because you're filling that role now. Um, so there was a lot of, speaking of doing 25 calls a week, back to back, nonstop with customers, you and I were able to pull a lot of conversation points and some kind of some I don't really know what you call them, but really just kind of pivotable. Oh my gosh, I cannot speak. Some really important moments in these conversations. And so I don't have my list in front of me, but I would love to kind of just talk with you on from a property management standpoint, from it's really hard to class everyone into a bubble when it comes to vacation rental management because property types are always changing, inventory amounts is changing, and then of course, like you said, destination location is always different than the other. But would love to kind of hear, when you are meeting with these customers and really being a part of their business and learning their tech stack and their operations and the hurdles they have to go through on a day to day, or the things that they do differently that are really successful. Where do you even begin with that? Like, what from I guess an industry standpoint, where do you even begin to dissect a lot of these different points and topics that can come through again multiple facets of people and companies?
Yeah. Yeah, it always for me, always starts with, the property manager's goals, their objectives, what they're trying to achieve. And if you start from that place and relate, the software, relate the platform and how they use it back to what's important to them, it's hard not to win. It's hard not to head down the right path. And what I find, and what I've found really over the last several months, and and speaking with customers, this summer's been kind of interesting, right? Depending on where you are, but I would say largely kind of domestically in the US here, it was a slower summer. Whether, it may have started out, a little bit hot and heavy, but kind of through the middle and
Yeah.
on in there, things slowed down. And again, domestically, largely, I've seen that trend here in the U.S. Whereas for some of our international customers, and I think, Will, you mentioned you've seen this in the data as well.
Yeah.
Some of the international destinations picked up, and people could travel again, and people made plans, this summer, to go to Australia, or to go to London, or what
Yeah.
have you. And so there definitely has been that theme, and that's going to necessitate some creativity, right? When you start to feel some pain, and maybe the demand isn't there that we saw through COVID, and people could only drive to destinations and maybe weren't doing as much flying. And so definitely been a big theme there with what I've called a little bit of a slowdown summer here, at least in the US.
Yeah. Well, the American dollar is now finally at a matching point for Europe. So our dollar is going a lot longer there, which makes sense because a lot of people, just like you said last summer, I think that drive to market was really, gas prices were more affordable. We didn't have highs of inflation. So the economy did play a big role, I think, last summer and this summer, which is, again, Air DNA. We had Jamie Lane talking about, the amount of international travel has picked up, but yet, I think Brian Chesky at the Skiff Forum just recently talked about there's more people driving or traveling to Austin, Texas than there is Barcelona. And Air DNA took that data, that quote, and actually put the data behind it and said, yeah, he's not wrong. Actually, there are more people going to Austin, Texas than Barcelona, but doesn't mean that the amount of travel from this summer to last summer hasn't increased, which it has
Yeah.
for international. So it's
Yeah.
just crazy. So for, I guess, give me an example, talking to these customers, um, hearing that this summer is a little bit slower, what are some creative ways that they're able to drive? Are they tapping back into the direct booking, route where if they own their customer data, are they getting it more aggressive with the campaigns? Are they finding more local partnerships to really draw in maybe a local stay or a staycation? Are you hearing any of these types of things with customers that really were just trying to pretty much grab anybody from any direction they could?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great segue, and mentioning Airbnb and many of the channels, many of the OTAs out there. As I see some of our customers, maybe that were over reliant on one channel or another, it could
Yeah.
have been any. But if they were over reliant on kind of just one place, for their business, for their leads, then they're in a place now that they're asking me, in these conversations, okay, like,
Mm.
what do I do? And that's everything from, certainly diversifying. I mean,
Yeah.
having connections to a multitude of channels, and there's some great, niche OTAs out there. There's some of the big boys that we all know. So, certainly not having all your eggs in one basket is always a good business strategy. And so we usually talk about that and kind of look at where the right fit is, and which channel is going to give them the kind of guests they're looking for. But then in addition to that, like you said, if they've been, collecting and building a guest database,
Yeah.
then they have the unique opportunity, to tap into that. And there are even, there are a lot of great tools out there to help you do so. I've talked with, quite a few folks about, StayFi as an example, great way to grab some information. Our customers that use our guidebook, and a lot of other guidebook offerings out there, you can have a splash page, kind of a landing page where you grab, some information from that guest when they're, getting ready for their trip and planning, their stay out there. And so, really upfront, grabbing some of that guest information, like you said, making sure that they're building out that guest database is super important.
Yeah.
If they haven't to this point, they kind of have to start at point zero, right? And they and
Yeah.
they and they have to start doing that. But if they have, then we really, I've been talking with a lot of customers about using our integration to Mailchimp,
Yeah.
there are a lot of other email marketing platforms out there and ways that you can communicate. Mailchimp's just a great one. We have a connection to, and getting creative about. You'd be surprised actually how few managers I talk to actually go back to previous guests and try and engage with them and try and drive an additional stay. And I think it's really important to keep in mind also when that traveler stayed. I think
Yeah.
sometimes the temptation is just to blast. You're just going to blast your whole guest list and
Yeah.
send everyone an email and try and get them to stay. But travel still is relatively seasonal, and people have to
Yeah.
travel around, when kids have vacation and just different travel patterns. And so paying attention to that booking window, when guests book, when they stayed with you last time, and then being able to target that communication to your previous guests based on that is something that I really encourage and have been working with customers on, as we reach back out to those guests.
Yeah, I think eventually they're gonna need to make like a dynamic software for dynamic like email outreach rather than just taking one list and shooting it. I think a dynamic list that times it off of all these factors would be super
Yeah.
cool. Just a startup idea for anyone listening out there. I don't have time to do it, so
Yeah.
um, no, that's a smart play. It is shocking to see the lack of um, use for email retargeting or even just like finding ways to capture the guests through social media. Again, preaching to the choir, I struggle with it too with our company, but it's because there's so many things to do. But I think it's one of those long term games that you have to play, right? It can't just be something you expect to happen overnight. So it's encouraging that you're pushing people down that route, just because I think sometimes we forget, and then you just need that little bit of a push every
Yeah.
now and then.
Yeah.
Um, with that being said, though, going into diversification of tech and distribution and all this other stuff, you and I were you talking about how nightly rate is great. That's where a lot of managers, not a lot, that's where all managers make a majority of their money, right? Is
Mhm.
taking that revenue split, whether they're taking 25% or 20 or whatever. Um, that's what drives the company's revenue. But I think you and I got to talk a little bit more about how the in-stay revenue is so important, so crucial for vacation rental managers, because that's not something you really have to split, and it's sitting
Yeah.
there in your property, um, waiting for you to really have that proper opportunity to capture it. So when you're talking with customers, is this conversation coming up in the sense of how do we grow revenue outside of your ADR and RevPAR, but going into the in-stay revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something maybe I should have mentioned when we were talking about kind of my background, but not
Mm,
only have I worked with property managers, but also with hotels. And for
yeah,
a long time now, hotels have known and understood that what they call ancillary revenue,
yeah,
ancillary to that lodging revenue is super important. And that could be a spa appointment, that could be dining, with a hotel. It's kind of the
yeah,
clear cut options there. For property managers, there are a lot more options, actually, I would argue. And so absolutely with our guests, and again, our guidebook book product specifically allows for our customers to offer a marketplace, for things like early check-in, late checkout, chef services, maybe grocery shopping services, like various kind of ancillary revenue opportunities. And then we also just launched a really cool integration with Viator, and being able to tie into activities and tours and all of those things within the area. And in addition to that, I'm seeing more managers just build out relationships with local companies that offer some of those services as
yeah,
well. And to build that relationship and come to some sort of a shared revenue agreement or a commission type agreement. And the whole idea being, once you convert that guest, again, hotels have known this for a long time. If you can, and retail too, like
yeah,
look at Amazon, like they're trying to drive your cart, spend, per
yeah,
visit up, and they're saying, hey, other people like you bought this. And really the same concept can apply in hospitality here for us. And so definitely I'm encouraging um, PMs to increase the profitability of their guests and to drive some of that ancillary revenue. It's a huge opportunity and something that really we don't do very well in the vacation rental industry yet.
100%. Sometimes it comes off a little too salesy. So I think that's one thing people need to work on is like, don't just nickel and dime to nickel and dime, but like add the value to it. I think, talking to what you just said, the local community around you is such a great way to drive natural organic revenue, but then also natural and organic experiences that relate into 5-star reviews, into rebookings, into all the above. That's how we focus on is if we can tap into what's already within the 5, 10, 15, 20 blocks around us, that's like our money maker right there. Which from my experience the hotel world um fails to do a lot of the times. If you look, like when I was a hotel manager, we never tapped into any of the local places outside of the front desk agents saying, oh, I love this place, go there for dinner or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
that's a natural recommendation. But to have the management company or the management team really say like, hey, this is like partnerships we can form. Um, it's very rare. So I think vacation rental managers for sure can definitely tap into that. I want to ask you a question on the integration with Viator. So can you explain a little bit like what does Viator do? Because I know talking to Fred on the team at Hostfully, just talking about how that partnership works. What is Viator and how could managers really tap into another product or service like that? um,
Yeah.
to grow that ancillary revenue.
Yeah, think of Viator as kind of like an OTA for activities and tours. Like they're
Okay.
aggregating all of these experiences within different areas, and then they're offering those up for guests to select from. And so it definitely is gaining popularity already. A very large. I think they're owned by TripAdvisor, if I remember right. Very large kind of influential platform out there for activities and experiences. And again, through the Hostfully integration, our customers, get a commission. They get an 8% commission on any of those tours that are booked through their guidebook. And so
Awesome.
just offers like a nice, clean, integrated way to plan that those additional experiential elements. And so we're really encouraging customers, through their communication, a day or two before arrival, and even further out, like right after a customer makes a booking, like,
Yeah.
drive and make them aware of some of those ancillary options, and promote that via not only email but also text. People get busy and then all of a sudden they're 2 weeks out from their vacation. So, send them a quick text message, just reminding them about some of the great things to do in the area,
Mm.
and pushing them in to check that out.
Well, I was gonna ask, man, doing what you do with Hostfully and just being a customer success person, you have to know a lot, not just about your product, right, with Hostfully itself, but you have to know all these like integrators.
Yeah.
How do you manage understanding and keeping track of who does what? And like it has to be a natural thing by this time, I can assume after doing this for so many years. But how do you manage
Yeah.
knowing who does what and when to connect the dots to them and what you guys do with Hostfully?
Yeah. I mean, even after, like I said, 12 years or so, there are a lot of new entrants. There are, excuse me, there are a lot of new companies and partnerships out there.
Yeah.
And so really, a couple of things. One, we have a partnership manager, Brooks, who heads up that team, does a great job of connecting us to kind of the latest and greatest, and also does a ton of education for our team. And so,
Okay.
and really, he and I are now locking arms and saying, okay, now how do we make sure we're educating customers and continuing to promote these partnerships and integrations that we have. But without him and without, someone really focused on how do we connect, great integration partners to Hostfully, it'd be hard. Like I don't have enough time in the day to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I lean heavily on him. And then the great thing is I get to talk to customers after I recommend, maybe an integration that seems like it makes sense for their business. I get direct feedback on how it's working for them, and so I know what works. I know what our customers love, and that's a really important feedback loop. So
I love that. Well, it reminds me of a quote. It's not how, it's who, or it's not what, it's who.
yeah,
So I think having that partnership with Brooks and all that in the team is super smart play on your guys' end. Um, All right, so let's dive into more. What's more things happening, talking about within the vacation rental operation side? What's the big focus that you're seeing a lot of clients or customers just focus on these days,
Yeah.
especially gearing up for I think another probably what's going to be a busy year depending on some economy stuff. But I would assume most companies are pacing out pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, owners are always an X factor. It's like this crazy it's something that I love about vacation rentals and the industry, but it's weird. There aren't a lot of industries or verticals where like you have, this weird X factor. Like you always have, like your business, your organization and the customer. Sometimes there might be a middleman or someone in between there, but you don't usually have this other stakeholder that like owns the inventory that you're trying to sell. And so it's always a topic that comes up, and specifically lately, there's kind of this new breed almost of owners, and maybe some of you are seeing this where maybe they bought during COVID, and real
Yeah,
estate was crazy, and and
yeah,
and it still is, but in some ways has leveled out. But they got into this vacation rental and at top dollar. And so now, guess where their focus is on production and on like, are you as their property manager, are you generating revenue for them? So
mhm,
there's always been that dynamic, but now it's like it's amped up almost because of the real estate prices and where people got into these properties and what their monthly mortgage is and what they have to cover. And
interest rates.
interest rates now, crazy too. And so it really, it, there's an opportunity and we've always, some of the best managers in the industry really understand this and they build great relationships with their owners and engage regularly with them. But a lot of times we kind of try to like ignore them a little bit and they're like, well, tell them as little as you can, like tell the
Yeah,
owner as little as you can. And like, that'll be better. But that's never better. And that's, certainly from my background in customer success, like ignoring, this really important business partner can
yeah,
hurt you in a big way. And that's really how I encourage our customers to look at that relationship. It's a partnership. And that comes with good news and bad news. Like you've got to
yeah.
be able to communicate both and have that open dialogue with owners and not be afraid to communicate when things within their home or how they're set up, are not maximizing bookings. And so it's a partnership and a relationship, and that's super important. But there is kind of like this hyped up, like you've got some of these owners out there that they're feeling the pressure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a conversation that's a little too close to home these days with how yeah, it's just crazy. Everyone, it's I love that you said partnership though because it really does drive I think a great tone and setting for that beginning early stage of the relationship. Um because and I'll even speak from lessons learned is
Hmm.
that when you try to say, "Thanks for signing your contract. We'll pay you once everything is paid out through the OTAs or whatever the reservations are." That causes, I think, a little like that silence, like because there's so much communication before signing a contract with an owner. There's so much communication. There's a lot of back and forth, phone calls, meetings, emails, you name it, and then just a lot of PMs. And this was like us when we first started, like with our first two, and we're like, okay, we probably still got to hold some hands outside of that point, but you know, get the contract signed, and they're like, all right, talk to you later, and it's just silence,
Yeah.
and so the owners don't really know what's going on. What's your plan of attack? And then a lot of times I see or hear managers talking about, well, the owner won't update this, they won't buy this, they won't invest in that, but the number one thing I asked, like, did you ask them to invest
Yeah.
in it?
Yeah.
Like, have you actually asked? Because you just assume, right? They don't want to spend money. They want to receive a check, not send a check. So, do you have give me, I guess, a good example of what are some cool owner relation type things that PMs are doing these days in order to really ensure that partnership is sought through, from the beginning to the duration of their
Yeah.
contract or duration of their busy season or whatever it might
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. It was funny. I was listening to you. You kind of described also the average software sales cycle. There's
Yeah.
like all this communication, like promises. And then if you don't have customer success, like if you don't have a team that like engages, through onboarding and coming out of onboarding, then it can be radio silence, and that's
Mm.
super frustrating.
Yeah.
But yeah, so absolutely, a couple ideas, I've seen, and again, these are this is taking the bull by the horns, but some of the property managers I see with the best relationships have a cadence to their communication. So, like you're saying, and that's a couple of things, and could be a
Yeah.
couple of things. One, maybe it's a monthly owners call where you get all your owners together. You talk about what you're doing, like if you've invested in a new revenue management, platform, and you're dynamically changing pricing based on demand, like why would you not communicate these things to your owners? Like that builds value and in their mind
Definitely.
and is going to build value in what you're bringing to the table. And so, regular cadence of communications, you can do it as a group. It's a great idea. You can do it individually, but certainly you want to try and reach the big audience as much as you
Yeah.
can there. um, with your property management system, your property management platform, make sure that, you've got them integrated into, kind of the partnership again, so we have an owner platform, owner portal that's part of Hostfully so that owners can see, when are they booked, they can add their own owner blocks. They can receive their statements there and even additional custom reports, and each owner can be a little bit different. They may want to see something a little bit different for their business. And within Hostfully, you can customize that reporting and what you share with them
Mm.
through a portal. And that's a big area that we want to keep developing and enhancing. There's certainly opportunity, to keep driving value there. But I think a lot of times we're guilty as property management systems, property management platforms, kind of ignoring the owner experience, but it's super
Mm.
important. And so again, like a portal, that integration and partnership, cadence and regularity and communication, and then talking about return on investment, talking about the revenue
Yeah.
that you're driving. I think even if you're sharing monthly statements with them, that often is not enough. Like you need to be sharing over the course of the year, how do we help you do, how do we help drive revenue for you. And the guys over at Ventori do a great job with that. And
Yeah.
it's a really important conversation point. Like talk, don't be afraid, and there are some owners that you may not be producing for. So you need to have a real brutal conversation about, why that
Yeah.
is. And it's probably not just your fault. Like you said, like it could have to do with their setup, their decorations, what have you. There
Yeah.
looks like grandma decorated for them. That's going to be a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. And then honestly, sometimes the location, it just isn't it's not right. Like not every excuse me, not every home is made to be a vacation rental. And I think that's hard for property managers to look at because they want to take every opportunity to add a door, right? Like it's you want to add more revenue to your company and you want to grow, but not every home's made to be that. It's just sometimes it just needs to be a residential home. It just needs to be
Yeah.
long term, or it just needs to, yeah, it just needs to be that property for that sake of not having a performing market. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was gonna say, what else? Like, what's some other big
Yeah.
things? Like, what gets you excited? Like when you're having these calls, what's some things that are being brought up that really just for you personally in your role, what gets you really excited when you hear these things from property
Yeah.
managers? I'm always curious on the excitement part.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, a couple of things. One is, when I see it click, when I see, and specific to maybe how we can make their life easier, using our platform, using our software. Like when you see that aha and they're like,
Mm.
oh my gosh, like I've been spending, 2 hours a week on this activity or on this report, and now I'm going to be able to automate that through the platform. That's so cool. That's just like, that gives me kind of goosebumps right out of
Sure.
the gate. Um, and then the second thing is just really, customer success is all about relationships. So seeing them grow, like seeing, someone come in, like maybe it's kind of a side gig, they're managing a couple properties, and this has always been the story of vacation rentals. I mean, it used to be realtors, like more so, like you would start out in real estate, and then you'd realize there's this big opportunity, and then Airbnb kind of, pushed out more awareness, to folks who may not have known about the industry before, and so it's like, oh, this is my side hustle, and then all of a sudden they're like, no, like this is a cool business, And it's challenging, but it's cool because you're helping people take vacation. Like by and large, like sure there's some business travel and stuff in there, but with vacation rentals, like people save up all year, sometimes multiple years, to plan this vacation. And as a PM and as software providers, we're part of that journey, and a really cool connection that happens when a family gets together or friends get together and they get to experience that. So when I see that a business grow, when I see a manager's business grow, and just think about the lives that that kind of touches, and just all of my great memories around family and friend vacations and stuff like that, it's super rewarding. But those are probably the two things. And in the property, and kind of maybe bring me to one of my last points here, like
Yeah.
what I still continue to see is that PMs are pulled in so many different directions, wearing a lot of different hats, trying to find great staffing. If it's hard for McDonald's, it's hard for all of us, like, right? Everyone's
Yeah.
in the same boat there. And so, our property managers are constantly, on the go, wearing a lot of different hats, maybe cleaning a property, running all over town. And so, really we're especially at Hostfully trying to make sure that we can engage and meet them when they're on the go, anywhere that they're at. Our mobile app is super close. I'm excited to share that more. Maybe some of the folks have seen, some of the videos on that, but it's going to be really important because, people are working from their phones more and more, and we
Yeah.
have that demand, that need is there, and it's a requirement. So
Well, I'm glad you said that because I was like, "Oh, man, I wonder if I could ask Bryce about this yet." But, I remember the day the unified inbox went live with Verbo and Airbnb and all the other messaging, ways that people are communicating with their guests, came live on Hostfully. I woke up and I had Verbo messages in my Hostfully login. I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes!" Like, it was such a small thing, but it just saved so much time and an hour. So I'm glad you mentioned that the mobile app. So tell us about this. Like I'm here. I'm gonna bug David. I'm gonna text him right after this. Like I want to see it. Show me the mobile
yeah,
app.
yeah.
But well, tell me more about like what's going on behind that and how you guys are really looking at the mobile first friendly approach.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very different approach, and we have an awesome team that's been working kind of behind the scenes in the lab on this for a while now, but you can't just reproduce your software, especially not a property management platform. You can't just like move it into a mobile app, and
Yeah.
because it's just there's certain activities that really don't lend themselves to being on the go. For example, managing rates and pricing on a mobile app. Like, sure, maybe you could adjust a few days, but like if you're trying to adjust your whole dynamic strategy, like that can be tough. And
Yeah.
so what we've tried to do is really prioritize the activities and the points of interaction that happen most often when you're on the go. So things like the inbox you mentioned, definitely, important to the mobile app, our calendar, being able to see your properties and your bookings, and even throw a block on there. Super important, being able to look at check-ins and checkouts and kind of your upcoming, uh, operations, right? Who's checking in, who's checking out, who's in house, being able to see that and manage some interaction from the mobile app, super important. So we're trying to start narrow, and some of those key activities that we know you can do on the go and that are important to stay on top of, even if you're out of pocket. And then we're just going to iterate on it. I mean, that's I think the important thing, and that's been something for me with Hostly that's been super rewarding, is to just see the volume of releases and new rollouts and improvements and enhancements, and just the cadence that we're hitting there is really encouraging, because sometimes you can get bogged down in tech debt and all this other stuff we don't
Yeah.
have to talk about. But it's been super encouraging for me, in my career in hospitality, to see the cadence of improvement and release going on at Hostfully, and always trying to be better. And so same approach with the mobile app. We're going to try and get it in everyone's hands, get them using that, and then, roll out V2, make some improvements, make some additions.
Yeah.
But like, if you wait until everything's perfect, and this
Yeah.
is something that David always says to me, and I love it so much, is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. right? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. Like get, if there's something you can do that makes a difference, like you can spend a lot of time trying to get it to perfect, or you can, roll with it, deliver some value and then keep iterating and keep improving. And that's
Yeah.
what we're going for.
Yeah, that's the only way to do it. I love that. So it's progress, not perfection. I love
Yeah.
it's a good quote from The Equalizer with Daniel or not Daniel. What's his name? I forget the actor's name. Anyways, look it up. The Equalizer. It's a
Okay.
famous actor. That I'm can't believe I'm blanking on his name. But
Check it out.
no, it's a great way to look at it, and I think it's super important because it's the same thing as property managers, right? Like there's never going to be perfection, but I think you just being truthful, being honest, being open, and just doing your best. I think is always going to be. It's always going to win. It's always going to
Yeah.
be the winner. Well, um, Bryce, it's been really cool to talk to you, and I'm excited to link up in VRMA.
Yeah.
But for anyone who's listened to the episode and has gotten a lot of value from our conversation today, what's a couple places you like to send them? Where can they reach out to you if they have more questions or if they're curious about some of the features or the products or even just the talking points that we mentioned on the podcast today?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to email me, bryce.c@hostfully.com. Pretty easy email address there. And then like you said, Will, I'll be at VRMA. I'm actively reaching out to customers right now, trying to set up meetings and, to do some business reviews or just check-ins with folks or, swing by the Hostfully booth and say hi. Would love to chat. And I'm happy to talk more about, what I'm seeing or specific to your region that you might be in. Pop over there, connect with me on LinkedIn, get a lot of interaction with folks there. But yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity, Will, and absolutely look forward to connecting at the conference coming up here and chatting some more.
Awesome. Well, I'm super pumped too. Thank you again. I got a lot of value from this. So I hope everyone who's watching, everyone who's listening, I hope you also got some value. And if you did, make sure you like and subscribe to everything Hostfully. They're great partners of mine here at the podcast. We love their products. We love the team, and you'll love them too. So go ahead, check them out, and we'll see you all again next week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.